this is an example of bad code in Python. In that video, I'm gonna try to improve it using different patterns and different techniques. We're gonna identify all of the issues that we have within that code, and we're gonna see if we can or cannot improve it at the end of that video. My name is Andrew, let's start. So once again, that is bad code in Python. And most of you write the same code in your everyday projects. So if you work as a programmer, if you just like to code, or if you're trying to become a programmer, you have to watch that video to get all the issues that are within this code. So let's see what that code has. We use SQL Alchemy. So SQL Alchemy is a library in Python that allows us to communicate with the database. If you don't know it, it's alright. You don't really have to know this specific library. It's just an example. Then what we have is three functions: create user, which creates a new user and saves it to our database; read user, which gets that user from the database; and add multiple users, which adds 2 users to our database. You don't really need to know anything about databases. Well, you have to know that they save your data and you can read data afterwards. You don't really need to know anything about SQL Alchemy or the way I write my code. What you need to know is the theory behind that code and why it is bad. If you write the same code in C++, in Java, it's going to be bad. No matter what, no matter the library you use, no matter the techniques you use, it's going to be bad. So what is the main problem within that code? Main problem within that code is dependencies. So what is a dependency? Dependency is when you have a piece of software that is not written by you and you depend on that software. In our case, it's SQL Alchemy. So SQL Alchemy is an external library that I downloaded from a website, from PyPy, it doesn't matter where, but it's an external library. And when I say we have a dependency, I mean that we can't really change that dependency to something else. So let's say to SQL Alchemy 2, or to Django ORM, or to Pewee, without changing our code. So what can we see here? We use SQL Alchemy here, we use it here, we use it here, here. So 99% of our code is SQL Alchemy. If I have to change SQL Alchemy, if I have to update it, if I have to use different techniques that are not supported in SQL Alchemy, so let's say that I want to use a specific technique on querying my data or on saving my data, but the only way that I can save data is using this snippet. So session add commit, that's the only way I can do that. But I want to do something else. I want to use some other technique, code style or whatever. I cannot do that because I depend on SQL Alchemy. That is a dependency that I have and that I must work with. Or if I want to change it, what do I have to do? I have to rewrite my whole code. And you might see why it's so bad, but how can we combat it? What can we do? Because, okay, I want to save data to the database, right? I want to query it from the database. But if I use any kind of dependency, well, I have a dependency. If I use any kind of module, I have a dependency. So what is the thing that we can do in order to combat that problem? What we can do is use a repository. So let's see the same code, the same example with a repository. Okay, and here is the same example, but with repository and unit of work. So our code changed slightly, not a lot, but it changed slightly. What you can see in here, so in our imports, is that we don't have SQL Alchemy anymore, but we use it. How is that possible? We don't have it here, but we use SQL Alchemy because we use repository. So what we have is an abstraction. So repository has SQL Alchemy inside of it, but we don't use it directly. That's the only idea. We don't use any kind of dependency directly. What we do is we use a repository that allows us to wrap around that SQL Alchemy or whatever, any kind of dependency, and then use that thing to work with our data. And repository is an example that works with databases. So you can't really get rid of all of dependencies using repository, but that's just an example. If you have a dependency that is related to the database, to your data storage, to your API, to something that saves your data, where you can query your data on something like that, what you want to use is a repository. Because what it basically does is that allows you to make your data a virtual collection. Whenever we use a specific database, it may have some specific language. So let's say that we use a relational database. Relational databases work with SQL, structured query language. So if you have never heard of SQL, it's something like this: select all from users. That is the way to get all of the users in SQL. Here's the thing: if we use something else, let's say that we use MongoDB. In MongoDB, we use this to get all of the users. We just put curly braces. In, Redis, we use this, keys all. So different databases, different data storages have different syntax when it comes to querying, saving, or doing anything with your data. What repository does is it allows us to make an abstraction around that data. So let's look at our code and create user. What we did in the first example is we used session commit, session add, all that stuff. What we do now is we create our user, then we say uov.repository, so we get our repository, uov.repository.save. We save our user. That's it. We don't say how we want to save it. We don't say what language we use. We just say, okay, you have to save this user. You decide how to save it. If you want to use SQL Alchemy, use SQL Alchemy. If you want to use MongoDB, use MongoDB. But just save this user. And we use commit, but that's for transactions. That's a little bit different. And it's not SQL related. It's MongoDB uses commit, anything uses commit. So it's just for the pattern. So what you want to do is that if you have any kind of database, any kind of data storage, what you want to do is use a repository, because repository allows you to make your data storage a virtual collection. It's basically the same, because I can query my data, I can use foreign keys, I can use whatever, I can create multiple users, do whatever, update them, delete them, read them, whatever you want. But the thing is that if you use a repository, you don't work with a specific technology, you don't work with a specific database. What you do is you work with the data. So you only work with your data. And here's the interesting stuff. If we remove our dependency completely, what we can do is choose any kind of database. So in the previous example, we could only work with relational databases because we used SQL Alchemy. So we could only work with databases that support SQL. But now we can work with any kind of database because we use repository. And once again, repository makes your data a very abstract collection. So what you have is a collection. You can save in that collection, you can update from that collection, you can query your data in that collection and do all that stuff. But you don't know what kind of queries, what kind of language you use inside of that repository, because you don't have to know it. You're a programmer who wants to use that repository pattern to get rid of all of your dependencies. That's how it works. So this code is far better than the first one. Again, all the examples with bad code, good code, and even better code that I have not shown you here are going to be in the description. That's it. Bye bye.